Today I'm going to be reading from The Running Dream, Part 4, Chapters 3 through 9. It's pages 216 to 237. Chapter 3. By Tuesday, we've given up on getting more donations from Gavin's newspaper article. It's been over a week, and they just haven't arrived. Wednesday morning, the bake sale table is missing from the courtyard, and at lunch, there's only one person staffing it. Plus, all the baked goods are store-bought, so no one's buying. Then, Thursday morning, there's a message in the announcements. All track team members are to report to Coach Cairo's classroom at lunch. Be prompt. No exceptions. Sounds ominous, Fiona mutters. Maybe it's just about today's meet. She shakes her head. We went over that at practice yesterday. By lunch, I've convinced myself that the meeting is to scold the team for giving up on raising money for my leg, and I walk into Cairo's room feeling dread. Why should my team be expected to raise $20,000? It's crazy. What's worse is I don't want them to resent me or feel like failures because they can't do the impossible. Within the first 5 minutes of lunch, over 90 people have crammed into Cairo's room. Even Meryl. Guys, Cairo finally says, holding one graceful hand high. I'll make this quick. Everyone falls silent. Item 1, he says. I've noticed a lackluster attitude growing among you. I close my eyes and think, oh boy, here we go. He levels a look across the room. That didn't take long. We've been fundraising for 2 weeks, and already you give up? No one moves a muscle, but I can feel it. Everyone's shrinking away from me. Where's your spirit? He asks. Where's your determination, your drive? You hit a little headwind and let it knock you flat? Hasn't being on this team taught you that around the bend of every headwind comes a tailwind? We just look at him. Item 2, he says. The office delivered this to me today. He holds up a stack of envelopes. For some reason, the helpers in the front office didn't know who to give Jessica mail to, so they collected it in a box. He smiles at us. So here's our tailwind. The checks range from $5 to $250, and our new grand total is $4,765. A roar fills the room. Item 3, he shouts, and we all fall quiet. We have a patron, someone who insists on staying anonymous. They have pledged $1 for every dollar we raise, up to $10,000. Wait, Mario Reed says. So that means we're already up to like 9,500? Very good, Cairo says. He looks around the room. We're almost halfway there, people. Cheers fill the room again, and this time people pump fists and pat me on the back and give me double thumbs up. Cairo lets it go on for a minute before raising his hand again. Last item. There's more? People whisper to each other. We will have visitors at our meet this afternoon. Channel 7 is sending a local news crew out to do a story on the team and on Jessica. Wait, Mario says again. We're going to be on TV? Cairo nods. They saw the article in the paper and want to help get the word out. He looks at me. You will be there today, right? I'm smiling and laughing and crying all at the same time. You bet, I tell him as I wipe my face dry. How do you feel about wearing a uniform? I hesitate. It was one thing to wear it at a car wash when I didn't know I was going to be in the paper. It's another to wear it knowing I'll be on TV. Mario starts a chant. Do it, do it, do it. It doesn't take long for everyone to chime in. Do it, do it, do it. I pinch my eyes closed. How can I not? Okay, I blurt out. I'll do it. Yay, the team cheers. Remember, people, Cairo calls out, this is the last league meet. Let's win this thing. From the roar that follows, there's no doubt that's exactly what they plan to do. Chapter 4. The team is loving having a news crew around. They make a show of everything, especially crossing the finish line. So far, the crew is not talking to me, so I try to forget they're even there and not be too self-conscious about my very visible fake leg. I do my best to act normal, and I shadow Fiona as she moves from event to event. The only time I really forget about my leg is when Shandel comes in second in the 100-meter dash. I cheer my head off for that because she usually gets edged back to fourth, and the best she's placed all year is third. Way to go, Shandel, I yell as she prances into the infield. She works her way over to me. That felt so good, she pants. Girl, I was flying. Yes, you were. I bump her fist when she puts it up. Flying with flames shooting from your feet. Shandel laughs. Glad you could see 'em, 'cause I could sure feel 'em. She cocks her head at something behind me and lowers her voice. You've got company. I turn around and see the TV news crew standing behind me. Jessica? The news lady asks. Her blonde hair is tied down with a scarf. She's wearing a designer sweatsuit and cute little pumas. Nothing like what she wears when she's anchoring the news. I'm Marla Summer. It's a pleasure to meet you. I shake her hand. She's smaller than she looks on TV, and even prettier. This is my photographer, Andy Richards, she says, indicating the man lugging a large black camera bag, a tripod, and a big lens video camera. He flashes a smile, then gets busy with his equipment. Your coach says you're okay with being interviewed? I nod. Good! She looks around, then points to a spot farther infield. Why don't we do it over there? I'd like to get the finish line in the background. It doesn't take long for them to set up. Marla tells me to look at her, not the camera, and the first thing she has me do is state my name. After that, she's off and running with questions. I'm nervous at first, but since the camera's a little off to the side, I try to block it out and just answer her questions. She's very attentive and nods a lot, and before too long she's done. Thank you so much, Jessica, she says. This is an important story, and we want to do what we can to help. I appreciate that, I say softly. How do you feel about us coming to your home? I think it would add a personal dimension if we could include your family in the story. I think that would be okay. You should ask my mom and dad, though. So I give her our phone number, thank her again, and set out to find Fiona because her heat of the 800-meter has just been called. I run into Gavin Vance instead. Hey, he said, I heard the good news. I look down because holding his gaze is just unnerving. Nice little snowball you got rolling. I glance up. Thanks. Hey, if it wasn't a worthy story, they wouldn't be here. Thanks, I tell him again, then start moving across the infield. It's Fiona's race, right? He asks, following me. You heading up to Rigor Mortis Bend? I cock my head a little. Wow, you better watch out. People might start thinking you're part of the team. This seems to please him, and he falls into step beside me as I trek up to the 300-meter mark. I'm starting to feel a little like it, actually. I snort. Yeah? Well, you've got a lot of wind sprints to catch up on, buddy. He laughs, then says, but I did take your advice. About? Running for more than just office. I keep moving. So you what? Went for a run? He nods. I've been a few times, actually. He laughs again. The first one was torture. It's been a long time. We walk for silence for a few steps, and then he says, You're amazing. This catches me off guard until I realize he's talking about the fact that I'm walking on a pipe. Cairo asked me to wear the uniform, I say with a frown. I'm not trying to be an exhibitionist or anything. Are you kidding me? Who thinks that? He shakes his head. Do you realize how fast you're walking? The gun's gone off for Fiona's race, so I pick up the pace even more. There's no stopping you, is there? He says with a chuckle. Not where Fiona's concerned, I tell him. She has been the most incredible friend. I don't know if it's my comment about Fiona or him not wanting to leave me alone on Rigor Mortis Bend, but he stays there with me. I cheer for Fiona on her first lap, and when she hits the 600-meter mark on her second time around, she's trailing the first-place runner from Hartwell, but not by much. When she crests the curve and hits the bend, I can see the grit on Fiona's face, the focus. I shout, You can do it, Fiona! Pass her! Gavin cheers her on too, and it's cute because you can tell he's never actually done this before. Words come out, but they're shy. He's shouting, but there's nothing really loud about it. When Fiona hits the straightaway, her head bobs and she bears down, moving out a lane to pass the girl from Hartwell. Kick it, Fiona! Kick it in! I shout, and then hold my breath as she edges past and wins the race. She did it! She did it! I squeal, and I find myself jumping and hugging, just like I would with anyone else on the team. Only this isn't just anyone. This is Gavin Vance, and it's my first physical contact with him of any kind. I've never even accidentally bumped or brushed or touched him before, and now I'm hugging him? Sorry, I say, pulling away. Then I try to cover up my embarrassment with words. It's just, you have no idea how hard the 800 is. There's no way you could get me to run that race. It's the 400 times 2. Rigor Mortis Bend twice. I have trouble facing it even once. I start moving away from him. Well, I'm going to congratulate her. Thanks for helping cheer her on. And I escape. Not that there's any danger of him following me. Not with Meryl making a beeline toward him the way she is. Chapter 5. Both varsity teams win handily against Hartwell, and the JV boys and girls squeak by. But it's still a sweep, and everyone is pumped. Meryl's nowhere to be found, but what else is new? And since Gavin disappeared with her, it's easy for me to just celebrate the moment with my team. Afterward, Fiona drops me at home, and to my surprise, the Channel 7 news van is parked at the curb. When I get inside the house, I hear my dad saying, They're still arguing about whose responsibility it is, and meanwhile, what are we supposed to do? This was a school event. It happened on a school bus. I can't believe he's telling them this, and the cameraman is getting it all on video. Dad, I say, throwing down my backpack, what are you trying to do? Get everyone at school to hate me? Marla Summers signals the cameraman to cut, then turns to me. This is a really important part of the story, Jessica. No! The story is that my team is trying to do something amazing and positive. We do not have to get into all this negative stuff. She considers this a moment, then has some silent exchange with my dad before smiling at me and saying, Your mother told me about Sherlock. Could we get some footage of you and him in your front yard? Sure, I tell her. Anything to change the subject. Anything to get her away from my dad. After about 10 minutes outside, Marla and her cameraman pack up and take off. I hang outside with Sherlock a little longer because I'm still upset with my father. But when I go back inside, I discover that he's upset with me. He sits me down at the kitchen table. Mom is standing off to the side, quiet. I'm sorry if you think I'm being negative, he says. I'm sorry if you don't want me to talk about the school district's obligation to meet your basic medical needs. But here's the reality. While the insurance companies are dragging their feet, I'm working 12, 14, 16 hours a day to keep us afloat. While they're deciding who is responsible for your hospital bills, your mother and I have taken out a second mortgage on the house. It won't begin to pay for everything, but for now it will put off collection agencies and ruin credit or bankruptcy. Ruined credit or bankruptcy. Because their lawyers are playing a game of cat and mouse, we'd have to hire our own, and he's told us that these kind of cases usually take years to settle. But if we don't fight for our rights now, you will get a measly settlement that won't include the medical care and prosthetic limbs that you'll need in the years ahead. You're still growing, Jessica, and your body will keep changing. Plus, prosthetic legs wear out. I've researched this, and you will need dozens of legs in your lifetime. At $20,000 a pop, that's not something we're willing to let go or pretend isn't a problem. As your parents, we need to prepare for your future. Anything less would be completely irresponsible. So if you think I was being negative with the news crews, I'm sorry. The fact is, I'm just looking out for you. How was I supposed to know? I snap. Why didn't you tell me any of this before? Maybe we should have, Dad said wearily, but we thought you were dealing with enough already. I just sit there feeling awful. I've known that my parents have worries, but I thought they would go away. I figured that in time everything would work itself out. But while I've been living day to day, worrying about walking, my parents have been taking the long view, thinking about my future. Before the accident, my future just meant college. College is something I haven't thought about since the accident, but Fiona and I did have plans, big plans. And now, thinking about my future, I'm slapped with the reality that attending our dream college is no longer an option for me. My parents couldn't afford it then. I'll never get a running scholarship now, so Fiona will be going there without me. That thought, along with everything my dad said and the obvious toll this has taken on my parents, hits me in the gut like an unexpected punch. I'm sorry, I choke out. Then I go up to my room and I cry my eyes out. Chapter 6. I seemed to have long heart-to-hearts with everyone that night. Mom, Dad, Fiona, Kaylee, and even Sherlock, although the one with him is pretty one-sided. By bedtime, I'm sick to death of trying to sort through everything, and I tell Dad that he can call the news station back if he wants to. He kisses me on the forehead and tells me for the 100th time that he wishes he could change things. And then right before he closes his door, he turns to me and asks, "What was Lucy's last name?" "Lucy?" "Sanders," I answer, but as he's leaving, I have a horrible thought. Wait! He looks back into the room. "You can't have her parents depositioned or dispositioned or whatever you were talking about before. Lucy's dead. They're not going to want to talk to lawyers. It would be mean to ask them to help us." He gives me a curious look, and I can see him trying to stay calm. "Jessica," he says quietly, "I want to see if I can help them." Then he closes the door.